The revelation hung in the air, a heavy, suffocating blanket. Susan stared at the worn photograph in her hands, a picture of her mother, younger, vibrant, a hint of sadness lurking behind her bright smile. The image mirrored the conflicting emotions swirling within her own heart. She loved Mike, fiercely, passionately, a love forged in stolen glances and shared dreams during their teenage years, a love rekindled with an intensity that had shaken her to her core. Now, that love was tainted, twisted into something unrecognizable, something both agonizing and strangely profound. The realization that Mike was her brother, not just her lover, was a violation, a brutal intrusion into the very fabric of her being. It wasn't just the loss of a romantic relationship. It was the unraveling of her personal narrative, the shattering of her understanding of family, of her identity. The world she had known, built on a foundation of shared memories and unspoken promises, had crumbled into dust. Her past felt like a carefully constructed lie, a deceptive fabrication, the truth an unwelcome guest invading her sanctuary. The comfortable narrative of her life, meticulously crafted over years, lay in ruins, replaced by a disorienting chaos that threatened to consume her. Days bled into weeks, each one a relentless cycle of emotional turmoil. At work, the usual humdrum of her marketing job felt surreal, a distant echo in the deafening roar of her inner conflict. Clients, deadlines, presentations all faded into a muted background noise against the persistent throbbing of her heart, a constant reminder of the impossible situation she found herself in. Her colleagues' cheerful chatter grated on her nerves, their casual conversations a jarring contrast to the tempest raging within. She found herself retreating into herself, losing herself in her work, seeking solace in the familiar routines of her job, a temporary escape from the agonizing reality. But even the sanctuary of her work could not fully silence the relentless churning of her emotions. Evenings were the worst. The silence of her apartment, once a haven of peace and solitude, now echoed with the ghosts of shared memories. The photographs, the letters, the small, insignificant trinkets that represented a life lived side by side with Mike, mocked her with their bittersweet reminders. She would pick them up, trace the contours of his face in the faded pictures, and feel a wave of unbearable longing, a physical ache in her chest. She tried to distract herself, filling her nights with mindless television shows, hoping to drown out the voices in her head, the relentless replay of their shared history, now forever tarnished by the bitter truth of their biological connection. But the images, the feelings, refused to be silenced. They surfaced unexpectedly, intrusive and jarring, a constant reminder of the impossible dilemma she faced. Therapy became a lifeline. Dr. Anya Sharma, a woman with kind eyes and a calm demeanor, listened patiently as Susan poured out her heart, her words a torrent of confusion, anger, grief, and a surprising, unsettling flicker of persistent love. Dr. Sharma offered a safe space, a non-judgmental ear, helping Susan navigate the turbulent waters of her emotional landscape. She validated Susan's pain, acknowledging the profound violation of her personal history and the complexity of her feelings. They explored the different facets of her turmoil, separating the romantic love for Mike from the familial bond that was now undeniably a part of their reality. It was a painstaking process, a slow, deliberate unraveling of the tangled threads of Susan's emotions. "It's okay to feel confused," Dr. Sharma had said, her voice soft but firm. "This is an extraordinary situation, and it's perfectly normal to experience a range of conflicting emotions. Don't try to suppress them. Allow yourself to feel them, to process them, to understand them." Susan's sessions weren't just about processing her feelings for Mike. They were also about confronting her own identity. Who was she, really? How did this new knowledge change her understanding of herself? The meticulous construction of her life, based on a foundation of belief and assumed truths, was now irrevocably altered. Her understanding of family, of love, of the very fabric of her existence was challenged, questioned, and ultimately redefined. The process of coming to terms with her new reality was both painful and liberating. During one particularly harrowing session, Susan found herself recalling a childhood memory, a vague feeling of familiarity with Mike, a sense of comfort and closeness that she had attributed to their childhood friendship. Now, she understood that this familiarity wasn't purely based on shared history. It was a deeper connection, a genetic resonance that had shaped their bond from the very beginning. The realization was both illuminating and heartbreaking. It explained the inexplicable intensity of their love, a connection that seemed destined from the start, preordained by a genetic code they hadn't known existed. The therapy sessions were not always about Mike. They were also about her relationship with her mother. Susan felt a surge of conflicting emotions: betrayal, anger, resentment, but also a deep-seated empathy for the woman who had lived with a secret for so long. Dr. Sharma helped her unpack these emotions, acknowledging her anger while also guiding her towards understanding her mother's perspective, understanding the constraints and pressures that had driven her mother's actions. The conversations helped Susan move beyond the initial feelings of hurt and betrayal, to acknowledge the difficult circumstances her mother had faced, and to begin a process of forgiveness, not just for her mother, but for Sass herself. The guilt she initially felt began to subside as she realized she was not to blame. One afternoon, Susan walked along the beach near her apartment, the rhythmic crashing of the waves a soothing counterpoint to the storm within her. The vastness of the ocean, the seemingly endless horizon, gave her a sense of perspective, a realization that her personal turmoil, while significant, was not the totality of her life. She still loved Mike, but her love was now tinged with a different kind of sadness, a deeper understanding of the complexities of their shared past. The love was not extinguished, but transformed, reshaped, and redefined by the unexpected truth of their sibling bond. The pain remained, of course, a persistent ache in her heart. But as the weeks went by, there was a shift within her, a gradual, slow acceptance of her new reality. Her identity was no longer defined solely by her relationship with Mike, but by her own strength, resilience, and capacity for love, a love that had survived the shattering of her assumed past, re-emerging as something deeper and more profound than she had ever imagined possible. The journey would be long, the path fraught with challenges, but Susan knew, with a quiet certainty, that she would find her way, that she would navigate the treacherous waters of her emotional turmoil and emerge, transformed, into a woman stronger, wiser, and deeply, irrevocably changed. The first family gathering after the bombshell was strained. Aunt Carol, ever the picture of prim propriety, barely looked at Susan, her eyes lingering on Mike with a mixture of pity and something akin to disgust. Uncle George, on the other hand, clapped Mike on the back with a forced joviality that felt more like a painful attempt at normalcy than genuine warmth. His wife, Beatrice, hovered near Susan, offering a sympathetic smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The subtle shifts in body language, the strained silences, the forced cheerfulness, all spoke volumes of the unspoken tension simmering beneath the surface. Mike's family reacted differently, a more fragmented response reflecting their own unique personalities. His father, a man of few words even before the revelation, seemed burdened by an almost unbearable weight of guilt. His mother, however, was surprisingly resilient, her initial shock giving way to a quiet acceptance, a determination to navigate this uncharted territory with grace and strength. His younger sister, Emily, a whirlwind of teenage energy, was the most unpredictable. One moment she'd be her usual bubbly self. The next, she'd retreat into a shell of silence, her eyes mirroring the confusion and hurt she was undoubtedly feeling. The contrast between the two families' responses highlighted the multifaceted nature of their shared trauma. Susan's mother, Eleanor, remained mostly silent during the gathering, her eyes darting between Susan and Mike, a complex mix of emotions, guilt, pain, and a quiet love etched on her face. She seemed to shrink under the weight of everyone's gaze, the quiet acknowledgement of her unwitting role in this devastating turn of events. The shared meal, meant to be a festive occasion, was punctuated by awkward silences and forced conversations, a testament to the chasm that had opened up between their two families, a chasm that seemed insurmountable. The easy banter, the comfortable familiarity of years past, was gone, replaced by a brittle awkwardness that hung heavy in the air. The extended family members offered a spectrum of responses, ranging from outright rejection to cautious acceptance. Cousin David, a staunch believer in traditional family values, couldn't quite reconcile his understanding of family with the reality before him. His words, though carefully chosen, carried an undercurrent of judgment, hinting at a moral condemnation that felt heavy and suffocating. Aunt Margaret, however, offered a more empathetic response, her words a balm to Susan's raw emotions. She spoke of the resilience of the human spirit, of the capacity for love to transcend boundaries, even those as deeply entrenched as biology. Her words, though offering little practical solution, were a lifeline in the turbulent sea of Susan and Mike's turmoil. Navigating these family gatherings became a torturous exercise in emotional tightrope walking. Susan and Mike found themselves caught in a web of conflicting emotions, torn between the desire for normalcy and the raw reality of their situation. The simple act of being in the same room with their extended families became a minefield of unspoken tensions, a battleground of judgment and misunderstanding. The casual inquiries about their relationship, the sympathetic glances, the hushed whispers all served as constant reminders of the upheaval their discovery had caused. Mike began to withdraw, isolating himself in a cocoon of silence, his normally outgoing personality subdued by the weight of everyone's judgment. He struggled to reconcile the love he felt for Susan with the undeniable truth of their biological connection. His once vibrant smile became a rare occurrence, replaced by a pensive frown, a silent testament to the internal conflict that raged within him. The vibrant young man who had re-entered Susan's life with such energy and passion seemed to shrink, his spirit dimming under the weight of societal expectations and familial disapproval. Susan, too, found herself retreating, seeking solace in the quiet corners of her apartment, the silence a stark contrast to the constant noise of family gatherings and strained conversations. The weight of their shared secret added another layer of complexity to their already strained relationship. The once easy flow of communication was interrupted by unspoken doubts and fears. They found themselves tiptoeing around each other, hesitant to express their true feelings for fear of adding to the already tense situation. The vibrant, spontaneous intimacy that had characterized their rekindled romance faded, replaced by a cautious intimacy, a tentative exploration of a love redefined by an unexpected, devastating truth. The ensuing months were a blur of strained conversations, awkward silences, and carefully choreographed social encounters. They learned to navigate the minefield of family expectations, adapting to the uncomfortable dynamics of a situation no one could have predicted. They found solace in each other's company, their bonds strengthening despite the external pressure. The intense emotional turmoil brought them closer, their shared experience forging a bond that transcended the biological one that had been so abruptly revealed. Their love was tested, challenged, redefined, but not broken. The families eventually found a tentative peace, an uneasy truce forged in mutual exhaustion and a grudging acceptance of the reality of their situation. The understanding wasn't complete, nor was it universally shared, but there was a recognition that pushing forward, however awkwardly, was preferable to the constant tension and emotional turmoil that had previously dominated their lives. Family gatherings still held an undercurrent of unease, but the open hostility had subsided, replaced by a hesitant, tentative attempt at normalcy. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but Susan and Mike, hand in hand, were prepared to face it together. The revelation of their siblinghood had irrevocably altered the course of their lives, tearing apart the tapestry of their past and forcing them to confront their deepest fears and insecurities. However, the trauma also served as a catalyst for growth, a crucible in which their love was tested and ultimately strengthened, forging a bond that proved more resilient and profound than they could have ever imagined. The family dynamics were forever changed, irrevocably altered by the weight of their secret. But within the wreckage of their past, they found a new foundation for their future. A future built on the strength of their love and a shared commitment to navigate the complexities of their unique familial bond. The journey was far from over, but their commitment to each other and to creating a new sense of family remained unwavering. They learned to redefine family, to reshape their understanding of love and kinship, adapting to a reality that demanded flexibility, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to navigate the unpredictable waters of their transformed lives. The scars would remain, a permanent reminder of the devastating truth that had shattered their lives. But the love they shared, tempered by hardship and tested by adversity, proved to be stronger, more resilient, and ultimately more profound than ever before. The weight of their secret pressed down on Susan and Mike, a heavy cloak stifling the joy that had once characterized their rekindled relationship. The tentative peace achieved within their families was a fragile thing, easily shattered by a misplaced word, a lingering glance, a sudden silence. Recognizing the need for professional guidance, they independently sought the help of therapists. Susan, ever the pragmatist, saw therapy as a tool, a means to an end to process the trauma, to find a way to navigate this new reality, to regain a sense of normalcy. Mike, on the other hand, approached therapy with a deep-seated reluctance, a stubborn resistance to vulnerability that mirrored his internal struggle. Dr. Emily Carter, Susan's therapist, was a woman of quiet strength, her calm demeanor a comforting presence in Susan's chaotic world. Their sessions began with a careful unpacking of Susan's emotional landscape, the initial shock, the disbelief, the agonizing grief of losing the man she loved, only to find him irrevocably bound to her by a shared genetic heritage. Dr. Carter listened patiently, offering gentle probing questions that encouraged Susan to explore the deeper layers of her pain, to confront the buried anger and resentment that simmered beneath her surface. "The anger is understandable, Susan," Dr. Carter said one afternoon, her voice soft but firm. "It's a natural response to feeling betrayed, not just by your mothers, but by fate itself. Allow yourself to feel it, to acknowledge it, without judgment. It's a part of your healing process." Susan's sessions became a safe space, a sanctuary where she could shed the carefully constructed facade of composure she maintained in the outside world. She talked about the conflicting emotions, the love for Mike, the painful awareness of their incestuous connection, the guilt she felt for a situation that was beyond her control, and the overwhelming sense of loss. She spoke of the fractured family dynamics, the strained relationships, the awkward silences that punctuated every family gathering. She dissected her own reactions, analyzing her defensive mechanisms, her coping strategies, and her unconscious biases. Dr. Carter helped Susan identify her triggers, to understand the patterns of her behavior, to develop healthier ways of coping with the emotional turmoil. She taught her mindfulness techniques, strategies for managing anxiety, and techniques to navigate difficult conversations with her family. Slowly, painstakingly, Susan began to unravel the complexities of her emotions, to find a path through the labyrinth of pain and confusion. She learned to acknowledge her anger, her grief, her fear, without letting those emotions overwhelm her. She began to build a stronger sense of self, a sense of identity that was independent of her relationship with Mike. Mike's journey was markedly different. His therapist, Dr. David Reynolds, was a more direct, confrontational figure, his approach tailored to Mike's stubborn resistance to introspection. Mike's sessions were punctuated by long silences, punctuated by Mike's terse responses, his defense as a tightly woven wall shielding his vulnerability. He struggled with the conflicting emotions, the profound love for Susan, the crushing weight of societal expectations, the gnawing guilt and self-blame. He wrestled with his identity, questioning his place within his family, his connection to his past, and the very nature of love and family. "You're running, Mike," Dr. Reynolds stated bluntly during one session, his voice sharp and penetrating. You're hiding from your emotions, from the truth of what you're feeling. You can't outrun this, Mike. You have to face it head on. Mike's resistance stemmed from a deep-seated fear of vulnerability, a fear that had been shaped by his upbringing and further solidified by the recent upheaval. He found it difficult to articulate his feelings, to confess his confusion and uncertainty, his fear of societal judgment, the shame of his unwitting transgression. He struggled to reconcile the love he felt for Susan with the undeniable reality of their biological connection. Dr. Reynolds challenged Mike's ingrained defenses, pushing him to confront his buried emotions, to unpack the layers of denial and repression that were hindering his healing process. He encouraged Mike to confront his guilt, his shame, his fear of judgment, to acknowledge the profound impact of the revelation on his life and his relationships. He helped Mike understand that his feelings were valid, that his struggles were normal, but he wasn't alone in his pain. Their individual therapy sessions provided a stark contrast in approaches to trauma and healing, reflecting the unique personalities and coping mechanisms of Susan and Mike. Susan's journey was characterized by a gradual unpacking of her emotions, a careful exploration of her inner landscape. Mike's, on the other hand, was a more confrontational process, a relentless battle against his ingrained defenses. Both, however, found solace in the therapeutic space, in the unconditional acceptance of their therapists, in the knowledge that they weren't alone in navigating this extraordinary challenge. As the weeks progressed, both Susan and Mike began to make progress. Their sessions became less about the initial shock and more about the long-term implications of their discovery. They explored ways to manage their emotions, to communicate more effectively, to rebuild their relationship on a new foundation. They learned to navigate the complexities of their situation, to accept the reality of their biological connection, while simultaneously nurturing their profound love. The therapy provided them with valuable tools to navigate the ongoing challenges, to cope with the emotional fallout of their revelation, and to build a stronger, more resilient relationship. The journey was far from over, but with the support of their therapists, Susan and Mike began to emerge from the darkness, their love and their commitment to each other, stronger than ever before. A testament to the enduring power of love in the face of extraordinary adversity. They continued to face challenges, but armed with self-awareness and effective coping strategies, they were more equipped to face their future together. The path ahead remained uncertain, but they walked it together, their hands intertwined, their love a guiding light in the complexities of their transformed world. The weight of their secret remained, but it no longer suffocated them. It had been transformed into a shared burden, a testament to their resilience and unwavering commitment to each other. They learned to live with the truth, to redefine family, and to embrace a future where love triumphed over biological limitations. The rain outside the cafe window mirrored the storm raging within Susan. She watched the water streak down the glass, each drop a tiny, poignant reminder of the tears she'd shed in the weeks since the earth-shattering revelation. Across the small, round table, Mike sat quietly, his gaze fixed on his coffee cup, the steam rising like a fragile veil between them. The aroma of roasted beans, usually a comfort, felt heavy, a stark contrast to the lightness she craved. 15 years. 15 years of stolen glances, whispered secrets, passionate embraces, all rendered irrevocably tainted by a truth so cruel, so unexpected. The love they shared, once a vibrant flame, had been reduced to embers, flickering precariously in the harsh winds of reality. Yet, here they were, in this quiet corner of a bustling cafe, attempting a fragile peace. I don't know where to begin, Susan finally whispered, her voice trembling slightly. The words felt inadequate, a pathetic attempt to bridge the chasm that yawned between them. Mike looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and longing. Me neither, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. He reached across the table, his hand hovering over hers before retracting quickly, as if burned by the unspoken implications of their touch. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the gentle clinking of cutlery from other tables and the rhythmic drumming of the rain. Susan felt a familiar wave of nausea, the gut-wrenching realization of their shared DNA, a constant, unwelcome guest. She thought of her mother, her own carefully constructed world shattered by this devastating truth. She thought of Mike's mother, the woman who had unknowingly shared her secret sorrow. But the trail ran deep, a wound that wouldn't easily heal. "It's not fair," Susan finally managed, the words escaping in a choked whisper. "None of this is fair." Mike nodded, a single, almost imperceptible movement. "No, it isn't," he agreed, his voice barely above a murmur. "But we have to try, don't we?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken hopes and fears. The tentative agreement, forged in the crucible of their therapy sessions, felt both fragile and audacious. Could they truly rebuild? Could they find a new path, a new definition of their relationship? The very concept felt almost sacrilegious. The therapy sessions had helped, offering a framework, a space for processing the impossible. Susan had begun to understand the depth of Mike's resistance, his ingrained fear of vulnerability, his struggle with guilt and self-blame. She had learned to navigate her own turmoil, her own anger and grief, while acknowledging the depth of the love that still resonated between them. Mike, in turn, had begun to accept the reality of their situation, to confront his deep-seated fears, and to grapple with the societal taboos. He had learned to express his emotions, however tentatively, to acknowledge the pain, the confusion, the overwhelming sense of loss. The confrontational approach of Dr. Reynolds had ultimately chipped away at his defenses, forcing him to confront the truth, not only about his relationship with Susan, but about himself. The cafe, with its muted lighting and soft background music, provided a temporary sanctuary, a space away from the judgmental eyes of the world. It was a neutral ground, a place where they could begin the arduous task of rebuilding, of redefining their bond. The weight of their secret remained, an inescapable reality, but it no longer felt as suffocating, as all-consuming. "We need to take it slow," Susan said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steadier now, infused with a newfound resolve. "We need to respect the boundaries, acknowledge the implications, but we can't just erase 15 years. Mike met her gaze, his expression softening. 15 years of laughter, of shared dreams, of love," he said, the word hanging in the air, imbued with a bittersweet poignancy. "That can't be erased." He reached for her hand this time, his touch hesitant but gentle. Susan didn't pull away. The contact was electric, a reminder of the profound connection that transcended the biological reality. It was a connection forged in childhood, nurtured in adolescence, and tested, yet strengthened, by the devastating truth of their shared origins. They spoke for hours, sharing their fears, their hopes, their lingering doubts. They talked about their families, about the awkward silences and strained conversations, about the challenges that lay ahead. They spoke of their individual therapies, of the insights gained, of the progress made, the long road ahead. They discussed the potential for a future one that would redefine family, redefine love, redefine everything they thought they knew. The possibility of a future together, under such unique and challenging circumstances, was fraught with difficulties. But they agreed that it would be built on honesty, mutual respect, and an unwavering commitment to each other's emotional well-being. They acknowledged the societal stigma and the potential judgment, the whispers and the stares, and braced themselves for the inevitable challenges they would face. They talked about the possibility of seeking legal counsel to understand their rights and responsibilities in this unusual situation. They recognized the need to inform their extended families in a sensitive and respectful way, and began to formulate a plan to gradually share the truth, preparing themselves for a wide spectrum of reactions, from understanding and support to anger and disbelief. They discussed the future, the uncertainties that loomed large, the possibility of building a new life together, respecting the boundaries, accepting the consequences of their actions. This new life, if they chose to embrace it, would require constant communication, unwavering support, and deep self-awareness. It would require navigating the ethical and emotional intricacies of their relationship, continuously seeking understanding and guidance, and accepting that the path would certainly not always be easy. As the rain finally subsided and the sun peeked through the clouds, casting a warm glow on the cafe, Susan and Mike sat hand in hand, a fragile understanding dawning between them. The road ahead was fraught with uncertainties, filled with challenges and obstacles. Yet, there was a glimmer of hope, a tentative promise of a future built on the foundations of love, resilience, and acceptance. The cafe, a quiet witness to their shared sorrow and tentative hope, symbolized the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter laden with uncertainty, yet brimming with the potential for a love that dared to defy the impossible. They had found a common ground, however shaky, a shared space of acknowledgement, acceptance, and a brave step towards an undefined future. The journey would be long and challenging, and they would face many storms, but for now, in this small corner of the cafe, they had found a fragile peace, a quiet understanding that perhaps, just perhaps, their love could overcome even this. The following weeks were a blur of therapy sessions, tear-filled conversations, and soul-searching introspection. Dr. Reynolds, their therapist, a woman whose calm demeanor masked a steely determination, guided them through the treacherous terrain of their redefined reality. She didn't offer easy answers. Instead, she provided a framework, a structured space where they could confront their emotions, unpack their trauma, and begin the arduous process of healing. The sessions weren't always easy. There were explosive outbursts of anger, periods of profound silence, and moments of raw vulnerability that left them both emotionally drained. But slowly, painstakingly, they began to navigate the labyrinth of their shared past. One pivotal session involved a role-playing exercise. Dr. Reynolds asked them to imagine themselves as separate individuals, untainted by the knowledge of their biological connection. Susan and Mike, initially hesitant, tentatively stepped into these fictional roles. They relived memories, shared dreams, and explored the idealized version of their relationship, unburdened by the devastating truth. The exercise was unexpectedly cathartic. It allowed them to acknowledge the depth of their past love without diminishing the present reality. It was a way to grieve the loss of what could have been, while simultaneously embracing the profound bond that still existed. Their individual therapy sessions were equally crucial. Susan delved into the betrayal she felt towards her mother, the woman who had unknowingly orchestrated this devastating twist of fate. She grappled with the implications of her mother's actions, wrestling with feelings of anger, confusion, and ultimately, a grudging understanding. She began to see her mother's actions not as an act of malice, but as a desperate attempt to conceive a profound loneliness that had driven her to this seemingly irreparable action. The process was agonizing, but it allowed Susan to begin the journey of forgiveness. Mike, meanwhile, confronted his deeply ingrained guilt and self-blame. He wrestled with the societal stigmas, the unspoken taboos that surrounded their situation. He felt the weight of expectations, the judgmental eyes of a world that struggled to comprehend their unique predicament. He fought against the internalized shame, acknowledging that he was not responsible for his biological connection to Susan, that the choice to use a sperm donor had not been his. His therapist helped him to understand that his feelings were valid, that his emotional turmoil was a natural response to an extraordinary situation. Beyond therapy, Susan and Mike embarked on a journey of self-discovery. They researched genetic donor programs, seeking to understand the prevalence of such situations, hoping to find others who had navigated similar experiences. This research led them to support groups, online forums, and eventually, a small group of people who had faced similar revelations. They met with other siblings who had been brought together unexpectedly in this way, sharing stories of shock, anger, grief, and, eventually, acceptance and resilience. These encounters were invaluable. Hearing other stories, learning from others' coping mechanisms, and realizing that they were not alone in their predicament gave them both a sense of hope and understanding. They found solace in the shared experience, witnessing the transformation from raw pain to a tentative healing, discovering that the reconstruction of relationships was possible. They learned of varying outcomes. Some siblings chose to remain completely separate. Others navigated difficult but ultimately fulfilling relationships. Each story was unique, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the complexity of familial ties. One particular meeting was particularly profound. They connected with Sarah and Mark, a brother and sister who had discovered their shared origins just a few years prior. Sarah, remarkably composed, spoke of the initial shock, the overwhelming sense of betrayal, and the period of intense emotional turmoil they faced. But her voice then shifted, filled with an unexpected warmth and acceptance. She described how, after years of therapy and self-reflection, they had forged a close and loving relationship. Sarah's story resonated deeply with Susan and Mike. She described the intricate dance of setting boundaries, establishing a new dynamic, and celebrating the unique bond that transcended their biological connection. Mark's perspective offered a different angle. He was more reserved, his recounting more cautious, revealing the emotional scars left behind and the difficulties of processing the discovery. His story served as a sobering reminder that the path to acceptance was not always linear. There were setbacks, moments of doubt and frustration. Yet, his final reflections underscored that the journey was ultimately worth taking. The interactions with Sarah and Mark offered Susan and Mike a profound sense of hope. It reaffirmed the possibility of healing and the potential for a positive future, a future redefined by their unique circumstances. They realized that their relationship didn't have to be defined solely by the societal norm, by the traditional structures of family. They could create their own rules, their own definitions, forging a bond built on honesty, respect, and a shared commitment to healing. The conversations with Sarah and Mark also highlighted the importance of setting healthy boundaries. They learned about the importance of establishing clear limits, both physically and emotionally. They discussed the need for space, the necessity of respecting each other's individual needs, and the importance of communicating openly and honestly about their feelings. They acknowledged that their relationship was unconventional, and that it would require constant vigilance and communication to navigate the complexities that arose. Building their new definition of siblinghood involved a profound reevaluation of their personal values, an introspective exploration of their identities, and a courageous confrontation of their emotional scars. It involved revisiting cherished memories, stripping them bare, acknowledging their shared history, yet simultaneously acknowledging the insurmountable biological reality. The redefinition involved constructing new rituals, new traditions, new ways of expressing their affection and support, devoid of the romantic undertones of their past, but filled with the genuine and profound love that continued to resonate between them. They revisited old photographs, laughing at shared childhood memories, realizing that the core of their connection remained unchanged. They found comfort in shared family memories, memories that transcended the biological connection and strengthened the bonds that existed between their extended families. In these moments, they rediscovered the essence of siblinghood, a deep and enduring connection that ran deeper than their romantic past. It was an ongoing process, a journey of continual self-discovery and adaptation. Their extended families were approached with extreme caution, the conversations fraught with both trepidation and hope. The reactions were mixed, ranging from stunned silence to tearful empathy, to outright anger and disbelief. The path ahead remained difficult, but the foundation of their new relationship, built on transparency and mutual respect, was strong enough to weather even the fiercest storms of disapproval and misunderstanding. As they navigated this new and unconventional familial structure, Susan and Mike were forging a path of their own, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of love redefined. Their journey was a testament to their courage, their commitment to each other, and the extraordinary resilience of the human heart. The road ahead would undoubtedly present its share of challenges, but as they stood hand in hand, facing an uncertain future, they knew they were not alone. They had found a new family, a new love, and a new path, one built on the foundations of shared history and the unwavering promise of a future yet to be written. Thank you for listening in on Lovers and Kin. Please follow this podcast for more amazing stories.